Hello, and today we're going to have a quick look at the Zygons from Warlord Games Into the Time Vortex Doctor Who miniature game. It's a bit of a mouthful. So, are they cool? Oh yeah, I think these are actually surprisingly good miniatures. And I don't mean surprisingly as in I expected Warlord to make a bad mini. I don't mean that. It's just, I wasn't quite sure how they were going to do it. When you look at Zygons, they've got a whole bunch of knobbly bits over them. That's part of their charm when they are in blobby form. And those tiny details are along the front here and the sides on a 28mm figure are indeed quite small and quite difficult to reproduce, but they're there. They've done a really good job. The only issues I have with both of them is more so this one than the second guy. There's a strong seam line on this side which needs to be removed. Luckily it's not over any of the blobby bits, so it's much easier to remove, and that's just part of the moulding process and it can't really be helped all the time. And of course you have these two spikes of metal which have to be removed. Now you have to be careful, very careful in fact, when you remove these. Don't just go in, cut and away, because there's touches on both sides on his fingers, or her fingers. It's hard to tell while in blobbiness what sex they are, if they even have a sex. I'm not sure with Zygons, but you do have to be careful because where this touches, it's right on top of the fingers, and if you cut it, of course, just haphazardly and without any due care, you're going to damage the fingers. Depending on your clippers, these are my old GW ones. They're starting to get quite well worn. These red ones came out before the black ones, and there's a new set. So this is quite a few years old. So I mean, it's quite close to having its day. But this sometimes, depending on the cut, will make a slight triangle. It will pinch rather than cut. So if that happens, it'll make a triangle where this is, and that'll have to be fixed once it's done to get it down to the shape of the fingers. So it's something to be careful of. If you're inexperienced, just take your time. Don't rush it. There's no awards for first place in this. Just don't mess it up. So take as much time as you need to get it right, and really look. If you've got a magnifying glass, anything like that, use it, because if you can see exactly where the finger is and you can see where your blades are going to be cutting it, it's going to be so much easier. Don't guess. But otherwise, these are fantastic figures. They're just the detail is really impressive on them. Now I don't know why there is these spikes on this figure and not this one, or actually on any of the other. None of the other figures I have them. Now usually this sort of stuff is there to make sure that the material, in this case the metal, gets to all the areas it needs to, all these little knobby bits and all the way down to the tip of the head. Because although a lot of these ones will use a pressurized form of moulding, I think especially with resin, that's very popular. You can still, if it doesn't get everywhere, you're going to have missing fingers, bubbles, air holes, stuff like that. So I think that's what this is for, but why it was needed on this one and not these ones, I'm not sure. But it's not a massive deal to remove, just be careful. But yeah, the back detail is fantastic. So one thing with these that's maybe a little less interesting than some other figures is Zygons are basically one colour. They're a red-ish sort of colour. Now that doesn't mean that you have to all do it the same way. There's there's so many different reds and oranges you could get away with using. So I'm not saying it's completely boring or anything like that. I'm just, with a Dalek, you've got this whole history. Even if you decided to be historically accurate when it comes to Daleks, you've got a lot of choices on colours. They did some really funky things for a while too. So there's a lot of choices there. But these guys are still going to be in roughly the same sort of tonal palette. But they're going to be fun to do. I'm looking forward to them. I liked them when they first came out with the Loch Ness Monster. I thought it was an interesting adventure for Tom Baker. And it was really cool to see them come back with the new series. And I'm going to be using them in the role-playing game. So now we're going to get some colour down. And I'm actually going to use an Army Painter red for my base, and then I'm going to go from there and add some extra sort of colour and try to get some nuances into it so it's not just a big solid red. So here's the first figures I've ever painted for the Doctor Who miniatures game, Into the Time Vortex. And to be honest, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, or which ones were going to be my first ones, but I didn't think it was going to be the Zygons. They just happened to be on my desk, and I was sort of looking at them, and they were interesting. I quite like Zygons as a villain, because they're sort of trapped. They are villainous in one way, but if you look at them from another point of view, they're just trying to live, and they sometimes make bad decisions, but they don't go out to be necessarily evil from the get-go. Something like a Dalek is just evil right from the start. It just wants to kill everything that's non-Dalek. Zygons aren't really like that. So I wasn't really planning on doing them though, but it just sort of came together. I was pretty impressed when I took them out of the pack. The detail, even on the metal, the bare metal was pretty obvious. The knobbly bits really stood out. And then when I primed them, the detail on the back was, especially back of the head, in this sort of area, there's actually this texturing which I hadn't noticed when I was just looking at the metal. And as soon as he started getting the primer and that on him, that really showed up. And the knobbly bits are just great. They really are. I know I talk about them a bit, but usually on a figure this size, that's the sort of detail you'll lose. That's the sort of detail that'll get soft, and you'll find those bits will be missing. Some will be there, some of them won't. They're all perfect. They're all great. So, 10 out of 10 for the moulding process on this. The only problem for me was the base colour scheme. Anytime you have a figure that is predominantly one colour, and I don't mean, usually we will choose a colour overall that we want for a particular figure. You might look at a ranger and want green or brown, but there will be his sword, he will have boots, pants, shirt, some armour maybe, arrows. There's all these different colours that you can sort of work in there, even if it's staying with one theme. When you get a predominant colour, like a knight that has no other, sort of accessories, just his armour, he's going to be very silver, very metallic, which is a problem we can face with Cybermen. That's the same thing, another predominant colour, silver. You don't typically mix those colours up. He's silver, so we've got to find ways to make them interesting. And that was the only other problem really with the Zygons, is they're basically one colour, red. So the trick was I used a lot of different washes, and the time it was actually in the washing rather than it was in the base colour. The base colour, took a while, but not too long. But the washes and the dry brushing and trying to bring all the detail out and try to make him not just this solid piece of red, that took time. Overall I'm happy with how it turned out. Nothing really that I dislike, which is good. I'm at times my own worst critic, and even if I've done something really well, I'll always find things I didn't do that I was happy with. But overall I'm quite happy with them, and for the price that you pay and the detail you get, these are great. I don't know how they're going to go in the game. I haven't played the game, so I'm not sure. I can't recommend if it's a great, if they're great to use in the game. But if you're a fan of Doctor Who and like painting miniatures, these are awesome.